What is going on, you guys? Welcome to my full card breakdown for UFC Fight Night 267 this weekend. Fluffy Hernandez versus Sean Strickland. Going down to Houston, Texas this week, and we got some really good fights. But as for last week, we did absolutely atrocious. Just a horrific card for me. Got most of my picks right and hit the prop of the night. But if I didn't take McCall and Donchenko to win by finish, we would have profited a ton. Unfortunately, there's nothing I can do about it other than learn from my mistakes. But this week should be better. Feel much better about these fights, and they should be slightly entertaining, unlike last week. So let's get into these fights. First fight of the night, we got Yadier Del Valle versus Jordan Leavitt. This is Leavitt's first fight at featherweight after doing his entire career at lightweight. Supposed to be like his career resurgence or something. I rarely think moving down in weight is a good choice, but never mind this late in your career. And he's always given me this vibe that he doesn't truly care about fighting or his career. He didn't fight for 2 years after his loss to Chase Hooper because he was questioning if he wanted to retire. Supposedly, he's been more dedicated in training, but that's still not what you want to hear when you're going up against somebody whose entire style was about breaking you, because Del Valle is an absolute dog. And I could sit here and tell you about how bad his entries and defense are. But unless Jordan Leavitt's coming in here with a baseball bat, it's not going to matter. He doesn't care what you hit him with, and he sure as hell isn't going to make it look pretty. But once he gets Jordan Leavitt to the fence, he's going to beat the shit out of him. And Jordan's going to be out there twerking during Bruce Buffer's intro, thinking to himself that he's facing guys that don't hit as hard because he's a weight class down now. Meanwhile, he's facing this Cuban demon. On the Contender Series, Del Valle couldn't get his opponent to the ground, so he proceeded to throw a beating on this guy like he kicked his dog. He landed 80 significant strikes in the second round alone, and still wasn't tired after. There's just a level of aggression to Yadier that Leavitt isn't going to be able to match. Leavitt's entire game is about getting the fight to the ground, and that means he has to be in the clinch, which is where Yadier does his best work. He's only ever won by finish except one split decision against Trey Ogden, and all of those finishes have come in the first round except for one, which ended the second round. But I don't think the odds are exactly in your favor when you take a 2-year layoff after questioning retirement, and now you have to go in there against this monster after cutting an extra 10 pounds for the first time in your career. So give me Yadier to win this fight, probably by finish. Next fight, we got Ramiz Brahimaj versus Punahele Soriano. This is a tough fight to call because most of the tape we have on Punahele is at middleweight. He moved back to welterweight for his past few fights, and I thought he looked really good at first. Cardio was much better, felt like his height and frame fit 170 a lot more. At 185, guys were just too big for him to defend their takedowns. I was very high on him going into his last fight against Veretennikov, but he did not look nearly as good as I'd expected. Cardio didn't look good. He was being super predictable, shooting the same takedown every time, kept putting his neck into the same dangerous spots while doing it. It didn't feel nearly as comfortable as a win as I would have expected. And while I haven't been very high on Ramiz in the past, this matchup does scare me because he's got some dangerous submissions. And the way he's gotten 2 comeback wins by snatching up guillotines in the past year just feels like caution tape is all over this for Punahele. Because I think Puna is the much better overall fighter. His striking is way cleaner and he carries a lot more power. He's got a background in wrestling and should be able to use it here. He's faced a much better competition at a weight class up, so he's used to guys that are bigger, stronger, and more powerful. But there's something about his last performance and the grit of Ramiz that makes this fight smell like provolone. Everything tells me that I should pick Punahele, but I'm so worried about him slowing down and shooting the same takedown over and over and getting his neck caught in a choke. But I gotta stick with Punahele. One of my least confident picks in the card though. Because if an in-shape and mentally good Puna comes into this fight, I think he wins decisively. It seems like Puna is one of those guys where how he is mentally leading up to the fight plays a major factor in his performance. I know last fight he had just had a newborn baby, so maybe his gas tank wasn't as good because he wasn't as dedicated for that camp. And Ramiz is tough and gritty, but he seems to just be losing every fight he's in until he finds a finish. He got out-wrestled the entire first round against Vanderford, was low-key getting pieced up by Mickey Gall before finding that knockout. I can't pick someone just based on a gut feeling he's gonna get a sub when I know the other guy is more skilled. So give me Punahele to win this fight, probably by decision. Next fight of the night, we got Nora Cornolle versus Joselyne Edwards. There's really nothing to break down about this fight. Joselyne Edwards should dominate. She got robbed in the first fight just because it's in Paris and Cornolle is French. And since that fight, she's gotten much better while Cornolle has just stayed the exact same. Give me Joselyne Edwards to win this fight, either by KO or decision. Next fight, we got Alden Coria versus Luis Gurule. I like Alden Coria in this fight. He trains with Joshua Van over at 4 Ounce Fight Club in Houston, so he's going to be fighting in his hometown. And to see him come in here and beat the brakes off Alexandre Costa was shocking to say the least. because what this kid showed in his past regional fights didn't even compare to what we saw in his debut, because there was a laundry list of flaws from his regional tape. but against Costa, his boxing was incredible. Hands were fast and crisp, phenomenal defensive grappling, heavy ground and pound, but his defense and reaction time were the biggest improvements. I couldn't believe how easily he was slipping the punches and kicks from Costa. And while my stock on Costa definitely dropped a little bit, he's for sure better than Gurule. I actually thought Gurule had some potential when he was coming off the Contender Series. There's a lot of flaws, but he's got some great takedowns and he's not afraid to eat a punch. But I wasn't impressed with what I saw in his last fight against Jesus Aguilar. He didn't seem really to change many of the flaws that he had, and he wasn't having as much success at all on the feet. He kept only landing one punch at a time. He would never string together combinations, even when Jesus got tired. Everything he's throwing just feels way too set up and telegraphed, especially when he's throwing the same combo over and over. And if he hasn't made those improvements, I feel like he's going to get pieced up by the boxing of Coria. So give me him to win this fight, probably by knockout. Next fight of the night, we got Alibi Idiris versus Osbourne. This is a very interesting fight. I'm actually very excited to see it. I have a feeling is going to be the public's favorite underdog this week, and I understand why. He's fought way better competition and has come very close to winning in some of them. But there are a couple of things with him that worry me, especially for this fight, because in his last fight he looked great, which was impressive to see against Serghei, but it was up a weight class at 135 since it was short notice. And I thought he looked so much better at that weight than at 125 because he's massive for flyweight. He looks like he could be fighting at featherweight. He's actually got a reach that's longer than most featherweights, and I thought he was going to move up to bantamweight after that fight. But I guess he's staying at flyweight, which I think is a mistake if I'm being honest, because you're not going to be able to do those weight cuts your whole career. So he might as well go to bantamweight now, get a few fights under his belt, and get a head start on working his way up the rankings. I don't think you should wait to change weight classes until your body is physically unable to do the cut anymore. You're never going to have the hunger and drive to start back at the bottom of a new division. And when you're cutting as much weight as is, there's no way you're going to stay as fast over 15 minutes and have your best possible cardio. Because in the first 5 minutes of a fight, looks like a world beater. Some of the fastest hands in the sport, the nastiest pull counters you'll see, brutal body kicks, perfect timing. He's a tough storm to weather in the first round. But if you can get through it, you're fighting a different fighter in the second and third. Because the reason his style is so effective in the first round is because it exploits his crazy speed. So once his speed is gone, his offense is not nearly as effective. We saw this play out perfectly against Serghei. He almost finished him in the first round using that crazy speed. And once he slowed down, it's easier for guys to shoot takedowns. And now he's worried about that. He became so jittery and spastic in the second and third round of that fight because he was second guessing himself and worried about the takedowns. It's almost like he recognizes that he's slowed down and knows that his style depends on his speed, so he starts second guessing himself. Because it's obvious that he doesn't have to worry about takedowns early on. No one's shooting on you when your counters are that fast and dangerous. But once he's in that third round, he already knows he struggles on the ground to begin with. He's tired, so it would be even harder for him to get back to his feet. His hands aren't as fast, so his counters aren't working the same. And it all creates this perfect storm that causes him to lose fights that he almost got a first round finish in. So it gives me a lot of hesitation to pick him to win, when I know that every minute that goes by, he's getting worse and his opponent is getting better. Because Alibi Idiris is not someone you want to have a bad gas tank against. People that are questioning if he's truly UFC level because of one loss are crazy. If you watch his tape from the regional scene, he's facing actual competition, and he's very hard for guys to deal with. He has that weird style where it's constant pressure, but you can never hit him at the same time. It's like that forward and backward rhythm that only guys with crazy gas tanks can have. And I love his striking. Super unpredictable, lots of power. I love the fadeaway check left hook that he has. And his background is in grappling, which is where struggles the most. So if he can make it outside of the first round, I think he's going to have the advantage everywhere, even in the striking. And his cardio is one of his biggest advantages. In one of his fights, he was chasing a finish to the very end of the fight and still had enough energy to land a head kick from jumping off the cage. So I'm going to have to go with Alibi in this fight. One of my least confident picks. I think there's definitely a chance gets a first round finish, but I think Alibi's style is a nightmare matchup for him. Very excited to see this fight. I think it's going to be one of the best fights in the card. Could be a fight of the night contender. But regardless, I'm going to have to go with Alibi to win, probably by decision. Next fight, we got Chidi Njokuani versus Leal. I don't understand why Leal was the favorite in this fight. I've never been too high on him to begin with. I really just don't get the hype. I mean, he's fought some bad competition in the UFC, really sloppy striking, absolutely zero defense or head movement. His only wins in the UFC are over Renat, who I think is dog water, and a knockout over Alex Morono, which I guess after last week is a lot more impressive than we thought. but I still don't get how that automatically means you're gonna knock out Chidi. In his last fight, he got knocked out in 40 seconds by Muslim Salikov, who's a lot less dangerous than Chidi. And stylistically, Chidi is a nightmare matchup for him. Leal has that almost karate-like stance, walk you down with his chin in the air, eat whatever you throw, and never stop coming forward. And that works great when you're fighting guys that have pillow hands and will crumble to that pressure. But this just feels like we're wrapping a present under the Christmas tree for Chidi. Because he's massive for the weight class, 6'3", phenomenal Muay Thai, and knows how to use his range extremely well. His whole style is about using those teeps and head kicks to keep you at a range that you can't hit him. And I love the way he incorporates his kicks within his combination. He's definitely shown some durability issues. Probably a big part is because of how much weight he's cutting, but his defense is so much better than anyone Leal has faced. His chin is always tucked, hands in that high guard, has great movement when he leaves the pocket. It's gonna be a nightmare just for Leal to close range against him, never mind find his chin. And he's coming off getting knocked out cold because he was too aggressive, so he'll probably be more inclined to fight at range, except this is the worst guy to try and beat from range. And if Leal does pressure him early, I wouldn't be surprised to see Chidi just clinch him up against the cage and use those knees and elbows like he did against Gooden. I can't imagine Carlos Leal, who's coming off a 40-second knockout, is going to have his career best performance, especially when it's the most talented and dangerous striker he's ever faced. If Rinat Fakhretdinov is landing over 100 strikes on you, I don't see how Chidi isn't going to be able to find that knockout shot. So give me Chidi to win this fight, either by knockout or decision. Next fight, we got Serghei Spivac versus Ante Delija. Another fight that's very interesting. And this is one of those fights because I'm surprised to see the confidence people are having in Delija. He's definitely UFC caliber, there's no doubt about that. And he does add some excitement to such a dry division, but we've seen so little on him. He's had 2 fights where both didn't even last a round, and it's probably safe to assume that his gas tank is good, or at the very least better than the slobs he's going to be facing. But we still have yet to see him on the ground. We have no clue how he looks even defending a real shot, never mind any sort of situation like being on his back. And trust me, I'm not going to be the guy to praise Serghei Spivac for much, but he does have some good takedowns, at least while his gas tank lasts. Now, I'm not over here about to pick him, you guys, calm down. I'm just saying, be careful betting a lot of money on these guys who we've seen so little on. But with that being said, I'm obviously going to be picking Delija. He seems like he's actually in shape, and we know he's a million times faster than Serghei. Just be careful throwing him in every parlay when we haven't even seen him touch the mat. But regardless, give me Delija to win this fight, probably by knockout. Next fight of the night, we got Dan Ige versus Melquizael Costa. Ige is an interesting guy to break down because he has so much skill and talent, but he seems way too measured. Like, I'm all for being quality over quantity, but he barely lets his hands go. He's got beautiful combos when he strings them together, but he's usually just doing 1 or 2 shots at a time. And he's got a great chin. It's not like he should be worried about getting knocked out, but he seems so concerned about what's coming back his way. And since he has that knockout power that can end a fight with 1 punch, or at the very least, swing the round in his favor, it leads to him letting rounds slip away while he's sitting back waiting for that one moment. To me, he's the perfect example on the importance of aggression, because skill for skill, I feel like he can go toe-to-toe with the best of the best, but he's always just barely not doing enough. Like, there's few guys that are skilled enough to almost knock out Lerone Murphy in the first round, but there's also very few fighters that would come that close to knocking someone out and still lose the fight. Not to mention, he had him on the ground for half of the 3rd round, but didn't throw a single strike in the ground. So Lerone Murphy stole the round with a minute left. Other times where he'll land a great shot and could land so much damage if he immediately followed up, but then he waits too long and misses his opportunity. And he seems like one of those fighters who's a striker, but they need to be able to out-wrestle their opponent to properly let their hands go. And after seeing his last performance, I can't help but think his career is on the decline. Because I'm not high on Pitbull in the slightest, but one thing he can do is wrestle. And since Ige didn't have that confidence in his ability to defend a shot, he spent the entire fight sitting and staring. And I'm not confident he's going to be able to out-wrestle Melquizael Costa. I think their grappling will probably cancel each other's out, but if someone is going to win the grappling exchanges, I think the size of Melky would give him the upper hand. And we've seen some drastic improvements from Melky within a short period of time. His boxing used to have a ton of flaws, and in less than a year, he's shown how much confidence he's gained in his hands now. But we run into a problem with this fight, because the durability of Costa is completely unknown. He's only ever been knocked out 1 time, and that was to Steve Garcia, who's probably the hardest hitter in the division. And besides that fight, he's shown to have a very good chin, but against guys that don't hit nearly as hard as Dan Ige. So Dan Ige hits harder than anyone Costa's eaten a punch from, but doesn't hit nearly as hard as the one guy that knocked him out. And if he can't handle the power of Dan Ige, he's going to get knocked out because he's eating way more strikes in the pocket from guys that are worse strikers than Ige. But ultimately, I don't think Dan Ige has enough power to knock him out. If it took him over 2 rounds to knock out Sean Woodson, who's much chinnier and easier to hit, I don't think he's going to find that big moment against Costa. And I think an already extremely low output Dan Ige is going to be too worried about takedowns or strikes coming back his way. So give me Melquizael Costa to win this fight, probably by decision. Next fight, we got Geoff Neal versus Uros Medic. I like Geoff Neal in this fight. Uros Medic is what I call a highlight reel fighter, because if you were to put a highlight reel together of him, he would look like one of the best fighters in the division. His knockouts are always just the craziest stuff, and he pulls these nasty combinations out of nowhere during fights, but his chin is way too suspect for someone with the power of Geoff Neal. It feels like every fight he's in, he's either knocking someone out or getting knocked out. And even in the fights he's winning, he's getting hurt bad. And Geoff Neal is too durable and defensively responsible to knock him out by swarming him like that. He's been fighting the best of the best for a long time and had never been knocked out before the Prates fight. He also came out and talked about how he recently got sober after struggling with addiction for the past 5 years. Said he only used to be sober for the 2 weeks before his fight and would come into fights very underprepared and out of shape, which honestly makes a lot of sense. When I broke down his last fight, I talked about how he had really good footwork and entries, but just wasn't letting his hands go enough. And hearing directly from him that he's surprised that he was able to stay in the rankings makes me think that we might see the best Geoff Neal we've ever seen. So give me Geoff Neal to win this fight, probably by knockout. And now we got the main event, Sean Strickland versus Fluffy Hernandez. Now, you'll never hear me say this again in my life, but let's just take a moment to thank Adesanya for this. And you might be asking yourself, why are we thinking the most fraudulent middleweight when he's not even relevant in the sport anymore? Well, it's because we're getting generational value fading anyone that's beaten him. Because when you're the most overrated fighter in UFC history, anyone that beats you is automatically considered a god, when in reality, it's just the first time he wasn't spoon-fed someone that was half his size or too scared to bring the fight to him. Because if it weren't for Strickland beating Izzy, these odds would be minus 15,000. But since Strickland exposed him, and he made it dominant enough to where the judges couldn't just gift Izzy another robbery, that automatically made Strickland one of the best middleweights of all time. Because when you're the UFC and your middleweight champion almost gets knocked out by a fat welterweight, and then after it, you claim he's one of the best middleweights of all time just because he sells pay-per-views, you now have a narrative to push. And there's no other division where the old generation was protected and coddled from the young, hungry fighters to preserve that narrative, quite like the middleweight division. The guys fighting for the belt haven't been the best in the division for years now, as they clearly were trying to squeeze out every last bit of pay-per-view juice from Adesanya. And I always knew he was nothing but a snake charmer, but the UFC still needed to protect this image of their golden goose, because let's be honest, that's why they gave him Strickland in the first place. And now with the UFC finally accepting that they can't just keep giving Izzy title shots loss after loss after loss, these guys who are the actual best in the division are finally going to be allowed to fight for the belt. Because to me, it seems pretty damn clear Adesanya and DDP and Strickland weren't the best in the division compared to guys like Khamzat or Fluffy or Imavov. And while I sit back and watch Izzy's fan base crumble trying to make new excuses after each loss to try and hide the fact that he was nothing but a fraud, we are still getting situations like Khamzat being only minus 200 against DDP. And this right here is one of those situations. I thought we were getting a discount on Fluffy against Delija, and now we're getting him even cheaper for this fight? Because if I'm being completely honest, I don't see how Strickland even wins. I'm sorry, but a teep and a jab are not gonna stop one of the most aggressive and violent guys we've ever seen. When people use the term weaponized cardio, there's no better example than Fluffy Hernandez. I've never seen someone who I'm so convinced has an extra set of lungs. He walks through everything, and if you don't get him out of there early, it's only a matter of time until he gets his first takedown. And once he gets his first, you might as well just pack it up and head on home. Because I'm telling you, nobody is beating this guy over 5 rounds. Because it's seemingly impossible for him to get tired. He doesn't care what you hit him with, and he's gonna drown you for every second of the fight. And it's the fight IQ too. He wants you to get up every time he takes you down because he knows it's better to let you tire out. The way he traps their leg when he gets them to the ground or just floats on top and grinds their forehead into the mat. How he chooses to beat you to the next position rather than waste energy trying to control you. He knows his cardio is probably the best of all time, and he's curated this perfect style that's just the most relentless and violent mauling I've ever seen. And you combine that violence with how underrated his striking is and how durable he is. I can't even imagine what it's like to fight someone where you hit them with your hardest shots and they just stick their tongue out or blow a kiss at you as they proceed to maul you like Brian from Family Guy. It's a one-of-a-kind style to say the least. And while I have a lot of respect for Strickland, he'll forever hold a special place in my heart for exposing the last dog bender. But there's just no way he beats Fluffy. Even a prime Strickland I don't think stands a chance, and he's probably on the back end of his career. After his last fight, he talked about how he didn't want to be in there, and you could tell while watching the fight live. There was no sense of urgency to try and put extra pressure on DDP. Even after arguably getting robbed a decision in their last fight, you would think he would put the gas pedal down and try and create bigger separation than their first fight. But it was clear he just wasn't himself in there. And I don't think that was just a one-time thing. I think he knows his prime is behind him, probably knows he's not getting the belt back. I would bet he's making a ton of money and is just showing up to get the last few paychecks. And he got married somewhat recently, has a dog now, and a new house with a wife, probably thinking about starting a family eventually. I understand these are all completely normal life behaviors for someone to go through, but Sean Strickland is the farthest thing from normal. And it's great to hear those things from a fan perspective, to see him, happy and healthy. But when it comes to Strickland and his personality, I think these are signs that it's him starting to wrap it up. So give me Fluffy to win this fight, probably by 4th or 5th round submission. And that's going to do it for this video, you guys. Thank you so much for watching. The parlay lock of the week is Alden, Coria, and Anthony Hernandez. Keep an eye out for the best bets video later this week, and the parlay lock of the week on either my YouTube or my social medias, my TikTok and my Instagram. Let me know what you think of these fights, what bets you guys have on the board. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and I will see you guys in the best bets video later this week.